When my 6-year-old son vanished in the middle of a national park, I thought I'd never see him again. But exactly 1 month later, he came back, standing on our front porch, barefoot, silent, and staring at me like I was a complete stranger. What he said next still haunts me every single night. I never thought I'd be the kind of parent who loses their child. You see stories like that on the news, and your first thought is always the same. How could they let that happen? I used to think. That way too, until the day it happened to me. My son Nathan had just turned 6, bright, curious, a little shy, but with a laugh that could melt stone. He loved dinosaurs, peanut butter sandwiches, and building forts out of couch cushions. He was the kind of kid that made strangers smile. Everywhere we went, someone would tell me how lucky I was. And I was. I still am, in a way. Back then, I was a single parent trying to do everything right. I worked during the week and gave Nathan all of my attention on the weekends. And that's why I planned the trip, just the two of us. A little camping getaway at Smoky Mountains National Park, a place I remembered from my own childhood. Safe, beautiful, quiet. I thought it would be a perfect father-son weekend. No screens, no distractions, just a tent, a campfire, and the sound of the wind through the trees. Looking back, I remember small things that didn't seem important at the time. Nathan was quiet in the car, staring out the window the entire drive. At one point, he said something strange. "Do you think the trees know our names?" I laughed it off, thought he was being imaginative like always. We got to the park around 4 p.m. and started setting up camp near one of the designated family areas. There were other campers nearby, families roasting marshmallows, kids running around, laughter in the distance. It felt safe, normal, peaceful. That night, Nathan crawled into his sleeping bag and asked me to leave the tent flap open so he could look at the stars. I remember sitting next to him, his little hand in mine as he whispered, "I feel like something's watching." I told him it was probably just an owl or maybe a raccoon. But even then, something in my stomach twisted, a feeling I couldn't shake. The next morning, we woke up early and hiked a short trail that looped around the riverbank. It wasn't steep, maybe an hour's walk. We took pictures, laughed. He threw rocks into the stream, giggling every time they splashed. And then it happened. 1 second, he was behind me, humming the Jurassic Park theme like he always did. The next, silence. I turned around. He was gone. We arrived at Smoky Mountains National Park on a Friday afternoon. The drive had been long but calm, about 4 hours of winding highways, dense forests, and the kind of slow descent into silence that only nature can offer. Nathan was glued to the window for most of it. He didn't ask for his tablet, didn't complain about the drive. He just stared out at the trees. At one point he whispered, "It looks like they're waiting." I asked him, "Who's waiting?" He blinked like I had interrupted something important and just said, "The woods." We passed the main ranger station where I signed us in and grabbed a basic map. I remember the ranger, a man in his 50s with leathery skin and eyes too tired for a job that was supposedly peaceful. He glanced at Nathan and said, "Keep him close. Kids wander off around here more often than we like to admit." I smiled politely and nodded, thinking he was just being cautious. I wish I had listened more carefully. Our campsite was near a trailhead called Pine Loop, one of the easier routes. Short, scenic, with a gentle incline. There were families nearby, scattered tents, the occasional dog barking. Everything felt normal, comforting even. I set up the tent while Nathan helped gather sticks for the fire. He kept pointing out weird shapes in the woods. A tree that looked like a face, a rock that he swore was watching him. I laughed, played along, took pictures. When the sun started to dip behind the ridge, everything changed. The sounds of the forest softened. The birds stopped chirping. The wind died down. It wasn't sudden, more like the slow closing of a door behind you until you realize you're in a room you didn't enter. Nathan grew quiet. His eyes kept drifting toward the woods, like he was waiting for something. I asked if he was okay, and he just nodded. But his lips were pressed tight, his shoulders tense. That night by the fire, I told him stories, the kind I used to love as a kid. He didn't laugh. He just stared at the darkness beyond the trees. Before bed, he said something that chilled me. "Promise you won't leave me here, Daddy." I ruffled his hair and said, "Of course not. We're in this together." He looked at me for a long second and whispered, "Because they don't like when someone leaves alone." I didn't ask who they were. I didn't want to know. We fell asleep under the stars, the tent flap open just like he asked. The sky was clear and the woods were silent, too silent. I remember that silence pressing against the outside of the tent like a thick fog, waiting for one of us to move. At 5:38 the next morning, Nathan woke me up. "Can we go for a walk?" he asked. I should have said no. I should have stayed in the tent. I should have done 1,000 things differently, but I said yes. We set off just after sunrise, following the Pine Loop Trail. The morning was cold and damp, with that heavy kind of mountain air that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel deeper. Nathan held my hand at first, quietly humming a song to himself. I think it was something from a cartoon he liked. Soft, rhythmic, almost like a lullaby. The woods were still. No birds, no wind, just the sound of our footsteps crunching over the leaves and the occasional creak of trees shifting in place. About 10 minutes in, Nathan let go of my hand. "I want to walk ahead," he said. I hesitated, but the trail was clear and flat, and he was only a few steps in front of me. I figured it would be good for him, give him a little sense of adventure, so I let him. He skipped ahead, still within view. He'd pause every few steps, turning to see if I was watching. I was. I always was. Then he darted off the trail, just a few feet, towards something in the trees. "Nathan, stay close," I called out. "I just want to see something," he yelled back, laughing. I jogged a few steps forward to keep him in sight, and then he was gone. No snap of branches, no sound of running, just silence. 1 second he was there. The next, there was nothing but forest. I ran. I called his name, over and over. "Nathan!" Nothing. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might explode. I crashed through the underbrush, retracing where I thought he'd gone. But the woods had changed. It felt different, as if the air had thickened, as if the space itself had stretched or bent somehow. I couldn't explain it, even to myself. I just kept shouting his name. After 15 minutes of frantic searching, I realized I was no longer on the trail. Panic set in. Real, paralyzing panic. I tried retracing my steps, but the trees all looked the same. There were no footprints, not even his. Eventually, I made it back to camp, breathless, shaking, already screaming for help. I ran toward the nearest group of hikers I could find. Within the hour, park rangers had been called. By midday, there were dogs, drones, search parties combing every inch of the forest, but Nathan was gone, just gone. No clothes, no bag, no sound, no tracks. Not even the dogs picked up a scent. It was as if the woods had swallowed him whole and didn't leave a single bite behind. I don't remember much of the first few hours after Nathan vanished. I was running on instinct, blind panic, and adrenaline. Time warped. It stretched and collapsed all at once. I'd shout his name until my throat felt like sandpaper, then stop and listen, frozen, hoping to hear a single laugh, a footstep, anything. But there was nothing. The other campers came running when they heard me screaming. A woman handed me a bottle of water. Someone else tried to calm me down, telling me kids wander off all the time and are usually found within the hour. I wanted to believe that. I clung to it like it was gospel. Park rangers arrived quickly. 2 men in green uniforms, one younger, the other older and clearly more experienced. They asked me for every detail, what he was wearing, how tall he was, when exactly I lost sight of him, which direction he ran. I answered everything in rapid-fire bursts, tears soaking my face. I remember saying the same thing over and over. He was just there. 1 second he was right in front of me, and then he wasn't. They nodded, calm, serious. They'd clearly done this before. The search began immediately. The younger ranger stayed with me while the other organized the first sweep of the woods. They brought in dogs, German shepherds trained for tracking, and gave them Nathan's shirt from our tent. The dogs ran. They sniffed the air, barked once, and then stopped, confused, disoriented. They walked in circles, whined, sat down. "No trail?" I asked. The ranger didn't answer right away. Then he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "They usually go somewhere." The first few hours turned into a full day. More rangers arrived. Then volunteers. Dozens of people walking shoulder to shoulder through the forest calling Nathan's name. Helicopters flew overhead. Thermal cameras scanned the trees and ground. Rangers carried radios, updating each other constantly. But no one found a single thing. No clothing, no food wrappers, no torn fabric, no prints, no broken branches, no blood, no signs of an animal attack. Just nothing. The second night, I refused to leave. I stayed in the tent, alone. My hands clutched his empty sleeping bag. I thought maybe if I stayed in the same place, if I waited quietly, he'd come back. Maybe he got lost and just needed a light or a sound or something familiar to guide him back. I stayed awake the entire night, staring at the woods. At 3:12 a.m., I swear I heard his laugh, faint, like it was being carried on the wind, far away, higher up the mountain. I ran outside, flashlight shaking in my hand, heart hammering like a drum. I screamed his name. Nothing, just the trees. I went back inside and cried so hard I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was a feeling I can't explain, like something was wrong with the forest itself, like it had eyes, like it had taken something from me and didn't intend to give it back. That night I had my first nightmare. Nathan standing at the edge of the woods calling to me. But when I ran to him, the forest pulled him away. Not trees, not roots, the forest itself, like it was alive. By the third day, the search effort had escalated far beyond anything I could have imagined. What started as a couple of rangers and volunteers turned into a full-scale operation. Trucks rolled in, carrying equipment, tents, radios, high-frequency scanners, satellite phones. The parking lot near the trailhead became a makeshift command post. There were generators humming, maps spread across folding tables, and men and women in uniform moving with quiet urgency. FBI agents were called in, so were trained wilderness recovery units, K9, teams and even psychics. Not officially, but I overheard someone say one had been consulted out of desperation. A few military-looking guys showed up wearing unmarked gear and didn't talk to anyone. They kept to themselves and hiked deeper into the woods than anyone else. No one questioned them. They brought more dogs, more heat sensors, motion-triggered cameras, scent kits, drones, the whole arsenal. Nothing worked. The drones picked up nothing but trees. The thermal cameras showed nothing but cold shadows. The dogs once again walked in circles, sat down, or whimpered like something was wrong. One dog refused to go into a certain area of the forest. Its handler tried to force it forward, but the animal dug its paws into the ground and barked toward the trees, not aggressively, but like it was warning someone or something. I watched all of this through a haze. I hadn't eaten in over 24 hours. My hands were shaking, my mouth dry. People kept telling me to rest, to stay strong, but I couldn't hear them anymore. I just kept walking the trail over and over, like if I took the exact same steps again, Nathan would somehow reappear. At one point, I wandered off alone, deeper than I should have. I don't know how long I was walking, maybe an hour. The forest was so dense, so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Then I saw something strange, a pile of stones, neatly stacked, balanced too perfectly to be natural. 6 stones, just sitting there in the middle of a clearing. Next to them, a red thread tied around a tree branch. I knew that color. Nathan had been wearing red that day. I called for help. Rangers came. They photographed the area, bagged the thread, scanned for prints. Again, nothing. No DNA, no signs of a camp, no proof that anyone had even been there. One of the rangers, a woman named Carson, pulled me aside later and said quietly, "This isn't the first case like this." "What do you mean?" She looked over her shoulder before whispering, "Kids vanish. Out here, always in the same general radius, no traces, no answers, and when they're found, if they're found, they're different." I wanted to press her. I wanted to demand more, but just then, another ranger interrupted us, saying they were about to brief the team. Carson walked away without another word. I stood there, stunned, watching them pin Nathan's picture onto a corkboard, surrounded by a dozen maps and notes, his name in bold letters beneath the photo. Missing, day 3, and still not a boo. Single clue. Time stopped meaning anything after the first week. I stayed at the park, refused to leave. The rangers let me sleep in one of their tents, gave me food I didn't eat, water I barely drank. My world had shrunk to 2 things, the image of my son's face and the deafening silence that had swallowed it. I stopped shaving, stopped checking my phone, stopped responding to people who asked if I was okay. I wasn't. I was unraveling, and everyone could see it. They just didn't know what to say. The posters went up in nearby towns. Nathan's picture on every bulletin board, every gas station window. Missing, last seen wearing a red jacket, 6 years old. I hated looking at those posters, not because of the photo. It was a good one, taken at his birthday party, frosting on his cheek and a dinosaur crown on his head. No, I hated them because that wasn't him anymore. That was before the trees took him, before the silence, before the nightmares. Every night, I heard things. Not dreams, not illusions. I heard things, breathing outside the tent, branches snapping near camp, whispers. Once, I heard someone say my name, not shout, say it, calmly, like it knew me. I asked one of the rangers about it. He didn't answer. He just stared into the woods and said, "The forest is full of echoes." But they weren't echoes, not of me, and not of Nathan. By day 9, the official search effort began to slow down. The rescue teams had done their sweeps. The FBI had run their profiles, ruled out foul play, abduction, animal attacks. They had been nothing, and people don't like staying where there are no answers. They told me they'd transition to a passive investigation. I told them to go to hell. They left a few people behind to monitor the trail in case something turned up, but for all intents and purposes, they had given up. I hadn't. I walked a different trail every day, talked to trees like they might listen, left pieces of Nathan's clothes near the river. I prayed, screamed, begged. No response. The woods didn't care. Then came the worst part, going home. It wasn't even my decision. My sister came to the site and begged me to leave, said I was killing myself, that I needed to rest, that Nathan would want me to be okay. I wanted to scream at her, but I couldn't even speak, so I went home. His room was untouched. His toys were still scattered across the floor. His bed still messy. I sat in there for hours, holding the pillow he used to sleep with, breathing. In the last of him I could find. And that's when the dreams started. Every night the same thing, Nathan standing in the forest, but not moving, just standing, his face blank, his eyes empty. Behind him tall shadows moved between the trees. Not human, but not animal either. One night he finally spoke. They said I could come back soon. I woke up screaming. I didn't know it yet, but he meant it. It was exactly 1 month to the day. I remember the date, because I'd written it on the calendar. Not to mark it, but because I couldn't stop myself. July 17th, the day my son vanished. I was in the kitchen that evening, sitting at the table with the lights off, just staring at the clock on the wall. The house was so quiet. No cartoons playing, no little feet running through the hall, no humming of dinosaur theme songs, just silence. And then a knock at the door, 3 soft taps. I froze. It was already dark. No one ever came to our door unannounced, especially not that late. My heart started pounding. I stood up slowly and walked down the hall toward the front door. Another knock, not louder, just the same. 3 soft taps. When I opened the door, everything around me seemed to slow down. He was standing there, barefoot, covered in dirt, hair tangled, eyes wide. It was Nathan. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. For a second, I truly thought I was dreaming, that this was just another nightmare I'd wake up from. But then I saw it, the small scar on his chin, the same one he got when he fell off his bike the summer before. My knees gave out. I dropped to the floor and cried. I held him, kissed his face, told him over and over how much I loved him, how much I missed him, but he just stood there, arms limp, body stiff, no hug back, no smile, no words. When I finally looked up at him again, I said, "Nathan, it's me, Daddy," and he blinked, slowly, like he didn't understand. Then, in a quiet, flat voice, he asked, "Who's that?" I froze. He looked at me, like I was a stranger, like he'd never seen me before in his life. I tried again. "Nathan, it's okay. You're safe. You're home." He stepped back. His eyes scanned the living room like it was unfamiliar territory. He didn't run to his toys. He didn't ask for food. He didn't even ask where he was. He just stood there and whispered, "Is this where I'm supposed to be now?" I called 911. The dispatcher thought I was hallucinating. The police arrived within minutes, and paramedics checked him out. Right there in the house. No wounds. No bruises, no signs of malnutrition or exposure, just dirt, a lot of it, embedded in his skin, under his fingernails, inside his ears. They took us both to the hospital. I held his hand in the ambulance. He didn't pull away, but he didn't squeeze back either. The whole ride he stared straight ahead, wide-eyed, like he was afraid to blink. The ER staff ran a full set of tests, blood work, vitals, cognitive assessments. The doctor came to me afterward and said, "Physically he's fine, but there are things we don't understand." "What things?" She hesitated. "His scans look clean, too clean. There's no indication of stress, no trauma, no signs of panic or disorientation. In fact, his brain activity looks oddly flat, like a machine that was shut off and then just turned back on." That night I sat beside his bed in the pediatric wing. He turned to me once and asked, "Do I sleep here now?" I nodded, holding back tears. "Yeah, buddy, you're safe here." He didn't respond. He just laid down, closed his eyes and whispered, "They said I could come back, but only if I stayed quiet." The first few days back home felt like walking through a dream that was turning into a nightmare in slow motion. Nathan was there physically, breathing, eating, moving, but he wasn't really there. He didn't ask about his toys, his friends, or even the dog we used to visit at the neighbor's house every afternoon. He didn't touch his favorite books or draw his usual dinosaurs. He didn't even laugh, not once. Instead, he stared, a lot, out windows, at walls, at corners of rooms like he was expecting something to appear. Sometimes I'd find him standing in the hallway in the middle of the night, just standing, perfectly still, facing the wall. When I asked what he was doing, he'd always say the same thing, waiting. I took him to a therapist, one who specialized in childhood trauma. She asked him questions about the woods, about what he remembered. He didn't answer, not once, just looked down at the floor with that same expressionless face. After the session, she pulled me aside. "Has he shown any signs of recognizing you?" she asked gently. I hesitated. "Sometimes, I think. He says, 'Dad,' occasionally, but it's like he's just repeating the word. She nodded slowly. It could be dissociation, memory loss, but I've never seen anything quite like this. He doesn't seem scared. He doesn't seem confused. He just seems detached, like he's performing. That word stuck with me, because that's exactly what it felt like he was pretending to be a little boy and not doing a great job at it. One night I tried showing him a photo album, old pictures of us at the zoo, at the beach, opening birthday presents. He flipped through the pages without emotion, eyes scanning the images like he was seeing another family. Then, out of nowhere, he pointed to a picture of himself at age 4 and said, "That's not me." I froze. "What do you mean, buddy? That's you when you were smaller." He looked me dead in the eyes, no smile, no curiosity. He didn't come back. I did. I felt my blood run cold. I didn't know what to say. The next morning I found something even worse. He had drawn pictures, dozens of them, in crayon and pencil scattered across the floor of his room. Forests, trees with faces, eyes in the dirt, black stick figures with arms too long and mouths sewn shut. One picture showed a little boy standing, alone, surrounded by these figures. Underneath, written in crooked, almost shaking letters, "They live where the sky doesn't reach." That same day, I caught him whispering to the trees outside the window. No joke. He had the window cracked open and was crouched on the windowsill, whispering something over and over. I leaned in to hear. At first I thought it was gibberish, but then I caught the phrase, "I didn't tell, I didn't tell, I didn't tell." When I asked what he meant, he turned slowly and smiled. The first time he'd smiled since coming back. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was hollow, forced, like someone taught him how to smile. That night, I didn't sleep. I locked my bedroom door for the first time in my life, and I started to wonder what exactly had come back to me. At first, I thought it was all psychological, the flat effect, the strange speech patterns, the drawings, the staring, but then the physical anomalies started showing up, and the story took a darker, more confusing turn. It began with something small. I noticed Nathan wasn't blinking at all. I mean, he did blink, just not the way he used to. It was irregular, infrequent, almost calculated, like a reflex he had to remind himself to do. I asked him about it one night while we were brushing our teeth. "You okay, buddy? Your eyes are looking a little dry." He stared at me in the mirror for a second and said, "They don't like blinking." "Who doesn't?" He paused. "Trees." That same night, he didn't sleep. I watched from the doorway for over an hour. He just lay in bed, eyes wide open, completely still. I finally walked in and asked, "Why aren't you sleeping?" He whispered, "I already did, for a long time." The next day, I took him to a pediatric neurologist. Blood work, reflex tests, cognitive assessments, all routine, except nothing was routine. His blood tests came back clean, too clean, not just healthy, abnormally perfect. His white blood cell count was slightly low, but not dangerously so. The doctor brushed it off at first, but when they checked his brain scans, things changed. The neurologist sat me down, flipped the screen toward me and said, "These are his EEG patterns, the electrical activity in his brain." I didn't understand any of the lines or colors, so he explained, "This is what we typically see in a child his age, active, responsive, flexible brainwaves. But Nathan's, it's like someone wiped the board clean. His frontal lobe activity is minimal. No response in the prefrontal cortex. Emotion, memory, impulse, all muted." He zoomed in on a section of the scan. "It's like something turned him off and then turned him back on." My throat went dry. "What does that mean?" He looked at me, not scared, but deeply unsettled. "I don't know." They kept him overnight for observation. More scans, more tests, more questions. One specialist suggested it could be a rare form of trauma-induced regression. Another mentioned catatonia. A third said it could be psychological mimicry. He's copying behaviors, not expressing them. None of it made sense. Nathan wasn't a shell of himself. He was something else entirely. Even his body seemed wrong. I noticed he wasn't growing. His height and weight were exactly the same as they were before the disappearance. I double-checked the pediatrician's records. No change. 4 weeks in the wilderness, and he looked exactly the same. Not thinner, not sunburned, not injured, not aged. Almost like he had been preserved, or worse, replaced. That night in the hospital, as I watched him sleep again without movement, without breath patterns shifting, I caught something that made my skin crawl. I leaned in close to kiss his forehead, and I saw it. A tiny black mark, just under his right ear, like a dot burned into the skin. Perfectly round. I touched it gently. His eyes opened instantly, and he whispered, "Don't touch that. That's how they listen." After the hospital released us, I brought Nathan home. But home didn't feel like home anymore. Every room felt colder. The lights seemed dimmer. Time felt slower, like something invisible had moved in with us, and it was always watching. Nathan returned to his room but didn't sleep in his bed. He preferred the floor, curled up in the corner by the window. When I tried to lay him back in bed, he shook his head violently and said, "The bed moves when I close my eyes." I didn't know what that meant. I didn't want to know. Over the next few days, I started noticing things, small things that shouldn't happen, like the lights flickering only when Nathan walked into a room, or how my phone, which worked fine everywhere else, had no signal inside the house anymore. One morning, I found every picture of Nathan on my phone had been replaced. Not deleted, replaced, with static, like old TV snow. No one could explain it. A technician at the phone store told me it was impossible and asked if I had installed some kind of encryption app. I hadn't. Another day, I caught Nathan standing perfectly still in the backyard, not moving, not blinking, just listening to something I couldn't hear. I called his name 3 times. He didn't react. Only when I touched his shoulder did he finally turn and whisper, "They're louder now because they're closer." I tried to record these moments. With my phone, with a GoPro, even with an old audio recorder I had in a drawer, but every file came out the same, corrupted, just static, or black screen, or long looping silence. The only thing that ever recorded anything strange was my baby monitor, the one I used when Nathan was younger. I'd reconnected it in desperation, wanting some peace of mind. One night, around 2:40 a.m., I heard something through it. Not Nathan's voice, something else. It was faint, like a low growl buried under wind. Then words, distant, stretched, warped. "He doesn't belong here." I rushed to Nathan's room. He was gone. I panicked, tore the house apart, checked the doors, the windows. Everything was still locked. I found him outside in the woods behind our backyard, standing barefoot in the freezing grass, just standing, staring into the trees. "Why are you out here?" I shouted, wrapping a blanket around him. He didn't respond. He just turned and looked up at me with dead, glassy eyes. "They want to know if I'm still working." I brought him back inside, heart racing, hands shaking. I wanted to scream, cry, collapse, but something inside me whispered not to. Don't show fear, don't run, don't question him. Because what if he wasn't just confused? What if something was using him? Or worse, what if whatever took him wasn't finished yet? That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in the hallway outside his room, holding a kitchen knife in one hand and a flashlight in the other. And every so often, from behind the closed door, I heard him whisper, "I didn't tell, I didn't tell, I didn't tell." I couldn't keep pretending. Whatever had come back from those woods. It wasn't just trauma, it wasn't grief, it wasn't psychological, it was something else, and I needed answers. I started digging. Late at night, while Nathan slept, or pretended to, I searched online. I reached out to missing persons forums, forest ranger threads, even paranormal communities. I didn't care how ridiculous it sounded anymore. And that's when I found it. A string of stories, all eerily similar. Children who disappeared in national parks. Most were never found, but a few came back, and the ones who did, they weren't the same. One story from Oregon told of a boy who came home after 40 days. He didn't speak for a year. Then one day he whispered, "They sleep under the roots." Another, from a woman in Utah, described her niece returning from a hiking trip, perfectly unharmed, but she no longer cast a shadow. No one believed her. She was institutionalized, and there were more, scattered across decades, across states, across generations, all of them centered on national forests. All of them involved children. All of them ended in silence. I contacted one of the posters directly, a man named Harris, whose daughter vanished in 1998 in the Smoky Mountains and reappeared 22 days later. His message came at 2:17 a.m. "Get out. Not just from the house. Leave the state. Leave the woods. They're watching through him." I asked what he meant. He didn't respond for 3 days. When he did, it was a single sentence. "They don't like when you ask too many questions." The next day I got a knock at the door. It wasn't a ranger. It wasn't a cop. It was a man in a gray suit with no badge, no ID, and an unsettling calmness in his voice. He asked if Nathan was home. I said no. He smiled, nodded, and handed me a card, blank except for a phone number. "If you see anything strange," he said, "call us before you call anyone else." Then he walked away. No car, just vanished down the street. That night, Nathan stood by my bed at 4 a.m. I woke up to see his silhouette in the dark. "I remember now," he whispered. I sat up, heart pounding. "Remember what?" He looked down at his hands like they didn't belong to him, the sound they make when they peel. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. The next morning I returned to the ranger station where we'd reported Nathan missing. I asked for Officer Carson, the only ranger who'd warned me before, but she was gone. Transferred, they said. No forwarding address. No explanation. When I asked why, one of the other rangers got quiet and muttered, "She started asking the wrong questions." I drove back to the trail where Nathan had vanished. I didn't tell anyone, just parked the car and walked deep into the trees, deeper than I ever had before. And that's when I found it. A stone circle, old and moss-covered, charred bones, symbols carved into bark, and in the center, a child's shoe, half buried in the dirt. Not Nathan's, someone else's. I felt watched. The air grew colder, the trees seemed to lean in closer, and I heard a whisper, not from behind me, but from inside me. "He belongs to us now." I left the forest that day with a part of me missing, not just because of what I saw, the circle, the bones, the symbols, but because I realized something I had been too afraid to admit until that moment. Nathan didn't come back alone, or maybe he didn't come back at all. When I got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I called for him. No answer. I searched every room, empty. Then I noticed the back door was open. I stepped outside and saw him, Nathan, standing at the edge of the trees. Again, barefoot, still, his head slowly turned toward me. But he didn't smile, didn't wave. He just stared, that blank, hollow stare that had become all too familiar. "Nathan?" I called. He tilted his head, just slightly, and whispered, "It's not done." Then he turned and walked into the forest. I chased after him, heart in my throat, lungs burning. The trees seemed thicker now, closer together, almost unnatural. I couldn't keep up. He was too fast, or maybe I was too slow. And then silence. He was gone again. I collapsed to my knees, broken, screaming into the woods. But they didn't answer. Only the wind moved now, only the trees, watching. Days passed, weeks, no sign of him, no footprints, no calls, no messages, just emptiness, until last night. At 3:12 a.m. my phone buzzed, an audio file, no sender, no explanation, just the title, "He Remembers." I almost didn't open it, but I did. At first it was static, then breathing, then a child's voice, distant, weak, cracking. "I remember you, Daddy. I tried to come back, but they wouldn't let all of me go." I dropped the phone, fell to the floor, sat there for hours, shaking. Because here's the part that still haunts me. That wasn't Nathan's voice from last month. It was his old voice, the real one. Soft, warm, scared, and it ended with him crying. Then silence, except for one final sound. Something breathing, right next to the mic. Deep, wet, not human. Now, I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know where he is. I don't know what I brought home. And sometimes, when I pass by a mirror or see my reflection in a dark window, I swear, I'm not alone inside myself either. They said it wouldn't stop with him, and I'm starting to feel it hasn't.